Idea Podcast. I'm Stephen Cochran, and I'm sorry for the delayed episode. Usually these take like about 10 days to put together. This one took a little bit longer. Have you ever worked a service industry job? What we call the service industry, I mean, it means a lot of things. Lawyers and doctors are technically in it, but that's not usually who we're talking about. I mean, waiter, bartender, front desk at the hotel, fast food, hairstylist. You know, being in the service industry usually distinguishes two things about the job. That the base of the pay is going to be the minimum wage, and it's generally considered unskilled work. You know, some of these jobs allow guests or customers or clients to tip as well. My experience is in bars. I worked in bars and restaurants for a long time. Fast casual restaurants, as they are termed. Really long time. I was a bar back in nightclubs, and then a bartender and a manager and a GM. And when I resigned in September of 2020, I was running about 13 bars and a couple of really great pizza places. Most of it being in the French Quarter in New Orleans, so very busy most of the year. But if you've never worked a service industry job, I mean, let's say as a bartender, put it like this. When's the last time that you had to meet someone, a stranger, and for some reason, be it, I don't know, they were with a friend of yours, or there's a small party at somebody's house you were at, you find yourself in that slightly awkward spot of introductions, who says what first, just that moment or those few moments. But when you bartend, especially in a place like Bourbon Street, but not just there, you're meeting a couple hundred people a week. I mean, there's times a year when you're making a drink every 45 seconds. You're talking to thousands of people. The pressure in those situations is unique because everybody needs your attention and wants your company. Everybody wants to talk to the bartender about where to go, what to see. Everything you make has to taste exactly like what each individual guest thinks that it should, like the way they make it at home or the way they get it at their local bar. And you're hustling for tips. You know, you have to be short-term charming. We used to train people and say it as they had 15 seconds to make a friend on the other side of the counter. You don't make much by the hour, so the bartender has to move as fast as possible, serve as many people as possible. It increases the volume of tips. It accounts for people that are only going to leave you $1. Well, you got to get to 10 people to get your $10. Constantly moving on your feet, 10, 12, 14 hours. Like during the second week of Mardi Gras in New Orleans, in one location, we would have a team of 10 people working 6 days, 12 to 14 hours per day on your feet for all but an hour of that maybe overnight. So 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. I mean, it's a taxing job. And then when it's slower or you're in a bar that's just in a less busy part of town, and this goes for any city that you're in that has, you know, the downtown or strip, the locations there and the people that work there are doing a certain job. And then you have bars that are, you know, dive bars, neighborhood bars, places that are a little bit slower. Well, there, your bartender's got to be the politician and the therapist and the best friend, you know, and the entertainment. And if they don't do that sufficiently well, then it, you know, directly affects their money. You know, there's levels to service industry jobs. There's a difference between working at a nightclub and working at an Arby's. But there's a lot more similarities. Or so take, let's say you work at like a Chick-fil-A or a Cane's, a Raising Cane's. You're going to be dependably busy every day that you're open. I mean, those brands make more per store on average than any of the others. Chick-fil-A does like $5 million per store per year. Cane's does like 4 million. And most of them, if not all of them, are franchises. So you work the window during the lunch rush. You're talking a line of hundreds of people with different orders, specifications, questions. And inside the place, you're going to have a team of, 6 or 8 all doing individual jobs repeatedly the same way to make the whole thing run. Keeping track of 25 tickets, each one with 2 different sides. When you get to describing the jobs, though, at this point, usually people will point out that it's not hard to make a sandwich. It's not hard to make a drink. Well, making a chicken sandwich for yourself at home or your kids is not especially difficult, but try making 1,000 of them in 8 hours to the liking of hundreds of different people. That's difficult. And now everything is automated, so every minute you're there, everything is a time crunch. And the schedule in these situations, you're lucky if you know your schedule 2 days before that week started. And the scheduling is done mostly by computers, so you can save managers' times, or really just not have managers for as many hours. So you get scheduled based on the sales from last year, sort of thing. Nights, weekends, holidays, birthdays, family time, all on the chopping block with one of these jobs. And of course, the people, us, the we, people change when they're being served. Not all people, but most people become different. When a person goes from a stranger to a guest, everything changes. The expectations change. How often do you tell a waiter your name after they've given you theirs? They come to the table, they introduce themselves. How often do you tell them your name? Not often, I would imagine. And in what other context would we spend this much time around a person that doesn't even know our name yet, and we're just giving them orders the entire time? I mean, it's a job where people are in their most entitled state. It's their money that you need. And it requires a series of things to get it. It's usually people whose budgets almost never match their expectations, especially in restaurants and bars. And we treat people behind the counter like they're working for us directly. People are their least hesitant to be rude and disrespectful to people that are serving them food through a drive-through or working the front desk at a hotel, or the bartender on vacation. Can you imagine what the past year, 2 years has been like trying to get people to put masks on and stuff when they come into your location? People getting pissed off and cursing out a waiter like it's their fucking rule. Now, they're being paid to do the job. It's not as though this is an involuntary gig. But there's something unusual happening around the country with these jobs. There are way more jobs open than people that are interested to fill them. There's story after story about restaurants, retail that are having trouble finding people to come to work. And the most rational explanation is people aren't willing to accept the same low pay for the work environment that these jobs are notorious for. Waiters being paid $2.13 an hour or some other piddling amount has been the norm for a very long time. They get paid that because they're tipped employees, so as long as their tips get them to the average of the minimum wage, they can be paid under the minimum wage. In a lot of states, it's $2.13. I've never understood the logic of that. So if we as the guests decide to pay them extra money because they did a really good job in our personal service, that somehow means that the owner of the place doesn't have to pay them for their time there. Because I guess he's allowing them to make these tips. It's very unique in the workplace. It's set aside in the Fair Labor Standards Act that deals with wages. And it really all comes back to how we even think about money. I mean, money is finite, or at least it's supposed to be. It has value because it's finite. There's a number, a top to it. If people started believing that money was infinite, everything would collapse. Nothing, it wouldn't be worth anything. It's also necessary to survive. And we've made it that way through society, which makes sense. I mean, you had to keep track of your debts and make trades in things that were unequal. If you have an apple and I have a bowling ball, those are not equal things. So we use money. One must have money to survive. I don't mean the dollar or the euro. Individual currencies will change. Bitcoin, doesn't matter. But it'll always be replaced with some form of money. Currency is the coin. Money is the numbers. I mean, we don't barter anymore. I can't bring my TV to the grocery store and get food. I can't make something at my house and bring it to the grocery to get food. So we've set up this system around this limited and necessary resource. And it didn't come out of nowhere. It happened because in 1938, people were paying under $0.25 an hour. So a company from any part of the economy is designed to make money. Provide products and services, but with the intention of making money. So by design, they are going to try and keep costs as low as they can. It's just a fact of business. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something we have to anticipate. So they're going to pay as little as they can to the people that work there in many, many cases. I mean, so the first minimum wage was set at 25 cents an hour because in 1938, it was apparent that there were a significant number of companies that were paying under 25 cents an hour. It's about $5 in today's money. There were companies paying under $5 an hour. Think about it that way. And we decided through the government and the Fair Labor Standards Act that that was not going to work. So you had to at least pay people the $5 an hour back then. Well, today it's $7.25. A quarter then, which is about $5 in today's money, and today it's set at $7.25. Actually, two states have a lower wage on the books. Georgia and Wyoming are at $5.15. It's just a fuck you, I guess. I mean, they have to pay $7.25 because of the federal law, but without that, I mean, imagine even starting at $8 or $9 an hour. You might get a raise, every year for $1. I mean, you have to work 12 months to just get another $1. What's the motivation in that? At $7.25, you got to work 60 hours a week to make $500. Okay, 40 hours gets you to $290. I read that the average McDonald's crew member makes about $9.50 an hour, and they're shooting to bring that average up to $15 an hour by 2024. That's the corporate McDonald's stores. But the problem is once we've decided, as we already have, that something like a minimum wage is necessary, the nature of companies is to keep costs low. Labor is a cost. We are the people and do not want ourselves to be valued at as little as possible. We believe that our time is worth something on its own. That is the minimum wage. Well, once we've agreed on that principle, among many other principles in our country, there's only two ways to make that happen. One is for us to pay more in taxes, and then the government pays people so that they have this base wage. Or we force companies to do it. So once you get past the idea that $7.25 is pretty absurdly low for 2021. We have to make a choice about how we're going to fix it. And it's either we do it with our taxes and the government just writes checks to people, or we tell businesses, the capitalists, look, you guys have to pay more. Figure out how to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to operate. Don't tell them how to do it. Don't tell them anything except for when it needs to be done by. That's it. And let them figure it out. The vast majority of businesses are going to figure it out. Luckily, I think a lot of the opposition to this is really, I think it's based on some misconceptions about how money actually works in the average company. It's like half people think that there's way more money left over at the end of the month for the person that owns the business than there is. And the other half think that, you know, they're all barely making it and can't afford to pay any more. But this change can work for everyone. The books matter. I mean, there's 1 million restaurants in the United States that employ 12 million people. Employing people to serve us in our leisure time. I mean, throw another 300,000 people on top of that work in the 60,000 some odd bars and nightclubs that we have. I mean, we only have 50 states. And this is in a pandemic year, too. These numbers are lower than normal. And it's still a huge part of the economy. It's a huge part of the culture that we have. Restaurants, taken as a whole, it's a $600 billion business in a fucking down year. But the structure of each place, how much do they actually make? We're talking about the waiters and the bartenders, but how much does an owner actually make? So this is something that I did for a long time, just in bars and restaurants. But the financial discussions and decisions, the company that I worked for was pretty big, but we also were in a space where you interacted with a lot of other companies of same size, smaller size, bigger, got insights into really how the industry operates across the board. And so we'll use a bar as an example. But this would be typical for a company as far as costs go in this space. So first of all, a lot of companies split their year into periods of 4 weeks rather than months. It makes sense. You want to be able to compare one period of time to another, 1 year compared to another. Well, you have to set it in a period. So, January 1 year might only have 4 Saturdays in it, and that's a really big day. And the next year, it might only have 3. Well, you want to be able to compare apples to apples. So you set it in a 4-week period, so it's got 4 of all the same days in it, and you can compare it a lot easier. So let's just say, in a period, you make $50,000, $50,000 in sales. That's everything you sold in those 4 weeks, $50,000 in revenue. Well, first of all, there's all the regular bills that we all have: electricity, water, insurance, rent, trash. These are the non-controllables. You're paying this basically whether you're open or not. So let's just say that's 40% of your money right there. And these numbers, they're rounded so that we can talk about them easier, but these are close. So $20,000 of your $50,000 is gone right there. You're left with $30,000. And now you got to buy things to sell them or serve them. So there's a cost to your sales: the cups, the napkins, the lids, the juices, the soda, the liquor, and then all the other stuff that's in the building, the toilet paper. You washed and cleaned the laundry several times in that 4 weeks, paper towels, soap, cleaning supplies, uniforms if you give those out. There's a lot of money for any business to spend. That could be another 20 25%. Let's call it 20%. So another 10 grand gone. So you got $20,000 left over. 20 grand left over. All the bills are paid except for paying the 5 people that work there, and then the owner keeps it. $20,000. So what would be fair? 50-50? Owner takes 10 grand. Each member of the staff gets $2,000 for 4 weeks. If they paid $725, they'd get a little under $1,600 for 4 weeks. And the owner would have $12,000 left to keep. And this is where the sticking point is. What's the right number? It's unreasonable to say that the owner should take $15,000 and leave everybody else with $1,000 apiece. We could all agree on that. That's unreasonable. It would be equally unreasonable to have an even split between all 6 people. I mean, it does take capital and it takes a measure of guts to take the risk of opening a business. It can go south and cost you a lot. And that's a fact that demands a higher share of the profits than any other individual person, to me, for the lifetime of the business. So saying just equal shares all around doesn't make sense, or it doesn't have to make sense. I'd say 3-1. $7,500 for the owner, $12,500 for the 5 employees. One thing that'll normally come up is that the number is low. 15% is what the owner would get. That's a small number. So the people whose agenda it is to pay as little as they can will say, oh, man, it's only 15%. Even banks will do this, and oil companies. ExxonMobil only makes 9% of its revenue. Small margins, they say. That's what they call it, small margins. They leave out that it's 9% of $72 billion. So damn near $7 billion at the end of the year, and you can actually hear people complain that their margins are low, that they don't have a lot of cushion. People that have money tend to discuss percentages, but looking at the dollar figure can be much more helpful. I mean, we spend dollars, not percentages. So owner makes $7,500, team makes $2,500 a piece, 3-1. That's fair. $1,600 is not fair. And you might say that that's not enough to incentivize someone to open a business. And to that I would respond, first, as I said earlier, if we accept that someone needs a certain amount of potential money to motivate them, just like an hourly worker does to motivate them to get a raise or a promotion, so same is true with a potential business owner. So just to point out, it has to be true for both. And then secondly, I had this argument with somebody about Amazon, and they said that, if Jeff Bezos knew before beginning this company that he would only be worth $10 billion rather than $200 billion, he might never have bothered. And that just seems unrealistic to me. And it would be the same for a McDonald's franchise owner or a bar owner. If you think that a bar owner won't open a bar if she can only make $90,000 a year rather than $130,000 a year, I just disagree with that. And some of the other common responses is get another job. If you want to make more than $7.25 an hour or $8 an hour or $9 an hour, go get a real job. That's what they say. This is not a real job. This is just for high school kids. Well, a lot of these jobs are filled by high school kids, and they're also filled by college kids that are going to school, and they're also filled by retirees that don't have enough money from their Social Security. So there's a lot of different people of different ages that work these jobs. But more than that, if I work in a place as a part of a team that's bringing in 1.8 million a year, that's as real as it gets. with a job. I mean, past that is just a question of degree. It's not Google, but it's a real job. Or they'll say, if the job doesn't pay enough, just get another job because you shouldn't be able to force this private company to increase their pay if they don't want to. The trouble here is that that's basically like the lead and paint argument. I don't have a natural right to have paint without lead in it. If a company makes paint for my house with lead and it's cheaper, and I, not knowledgeable at how harmful lead can be to my health, use the paint, that's on me. No, we set standards for companies in all sorts of ways. We don't let them put the lead in the paint. We don't let them dump waste in the drinking water, mostly. And we don't let them operate while paying people less than their inherent worth. It's really what it is about, the value of people just for being people, their time on its own. Increasing wages will lead to companies going out of business, is another one. Well, luckily, some places have gotten ahead of all of us and made these changes so we can see what happened. First of all, the people being paid made more money and didn't have to work as many hours. And secondly, I keep finding that there is some debate about whether raising wages will lead to businesses closing. This is probably the biggest argument against it. And some studies say that it does not, and others say that it does, but the effect is small. What I don't find anywhere from the Harvard Business Review or studies done from Berkeley or one from the Institute of Labor and Employment, what I don't see anywhere is massive business closure, towns going under, and all this sort of stuff. It doesn't happen. Some companies, though, won't figure it out. They won't. Some companies will close. And we have this like irrational fear of companies going out of business. It's like a fear of death. It's part of the process. The natural ebb and flow as an economy evolves. We get better and better. We don't pay what was a reasonable wage in 1990 in 2021. Some businesses will go out of business because of that. And new businesses that can operate in that environment will open. That's how it works. I've said it before. There were some companies that went out of business when we stopped allowing children to work. They couldn't figure it out, and they closed. It's all right that they closed. But this everything will collapse. I mean, look, you have Costco. It's a huge billion-dollar company, 180,000 workers. Half of them make $25 per hour or more. And all of them make at least $15 an hour. They figured it out. All the way down to Molly Moon's Ice Cream. It's a little chain of ice cream restaurants. There's 7 or 8 of them in Washington. $16 minimum wage. Health insurance. 12 weeks paid leave for women and men that work there. Sick and safe pay for all employees. Career advancement. All at Molly Moon's Ice Cream Place. If we can figure it out with an ice cream place, you can figure it out at any other business. Well, the cost of living in some places doesn't dictate an increase. This is my favorite. People will say that the cost of living in some places is lower than others, so the wages there don't need to be as high. Imagine that you tell someone you won't pay them what they're worth because the shit at Walmart doesn't cost enough. So the cost of the things around you devalue your time. So if I work at a Burger King in Waynesboro, Mississippi, my time is worth less than if I worked in Seattle. Why are we measuring each other's value by how much the fucking bread in the grocery store costs? And then there's, of course, increase in prices. If wages go up, prices go up. The dollar menu may become the $2.50 menu. Meals at restaurants will go up. This is undeniable. Prices will go up for things that have been absurdly low for a long time. This is something that we all have to accept, that we've had it easier than we should for a while when it comes to things that we don't need. These are luxuries that we want. We don't need them. Nobody needs to go to the bar. Nobody needs to go out to eat to a restaurant. You don't need fast food. It's a luxury service that we have had kept as cheap as possible. And it just isn't sustainable. We can't keep doing that. And depending on the business, other effects besides price increases will happen too. I mean, you can imagine that the corporate McDonald's is not going to want to just be losing franchises left and right. They'll probably do stuff like reduce their franchise fees or assist their franchise owners a little bit more financially in other ways. Lots of unintended consequences will happen. But it all comes from this base of we've decided that time is worth something. People's time is worth something. Now, some companies will try and pass all the cost off onto their customers. And those companies will go out of business because people aren't going to continue to be patrons there. Companies that up until now have been run very poorly, that carry a lot of debt, that make a lot of risky moves, that can't handle this sort of thing, those are going to go out of business too. This is the natural flow of capitalism. The smart companies will see the writing on the wall, and they'll have a balanced approach, a mix between some higher prices and some less profits. Wage increases are going to increase the cost of some things, but not on like a one-to-one. I mean, it's always made to be a battle against the extreme. It's described as though we're talking about raising wages to $50 an hour. Nobody that I've heard has suggested that. We're talking about a reasonable number here. But this kind of leads me into what I think is the best idea here. And the number one thing is we're going to have to expect to pay more for luxuries. There's no getting around it. You can't expect people to be paid more and every dollar of that come out of a restaurant owner's pocket. Much of it can and should, but it's also going to come from the guests. We've been living in a world where lots of things have been kept artificially cheap because the floor hasn't been lifted in 12 years. That's the last increase in the minimum wage we had. Think of all the progress the economy's made in 12 years. Stock market, cash on hand for every company in the country. 12 years has seen tremendous growth. Nothing on the minimum wage. And it hasn't been lifted properly in the last 50 years when productivity and the wage just separated off. The next thing is that the minimum wage needs to go up to $16.25 an hour. And we give them 4 years to implement it. That gets you to $650 a week before taxes. That is a reasonable weekly wage. But then that wage should go up $2 every other year for 2 years. So within 8 years, our base wage is $20.25. And we'll still be behind where we should be, but it's a step in the right direction. If wages and productivity, how much money we make off the same hour of work, productivity has gone up tremendously more than wages have. The wage right now should be about $26 if it matched productivity perfectly. So $20.25 still puts us behind the eight ball a little bit, but is a big step forward. And any establishment that's just paying a base wage should allow staff to collect tips from guests. Why I understand that the aesthetics, the look of it, some people don't like. They don't want their company associated with tips for some reason. It's a game changer for your teams. If you train them well, it will just be a benefit. You shouldn't stop somebody from getting additional appreciation from people that they're serving. And then I think the last thing is pay transparency. People need to be more open about money. We need to be more open about money. Talk about it more openly. I mean, I'm not suggesting you go through all the financials of your family with any coworker, but I'm saying that coworkers should be willing to discuss with each other the money they make, and companies should have to make wages accessible to everybody on their team. From entry level to ownership, everybody should know what everybody makes. The only reason that info would be kept from the team is so that they don't know what to ask for or what to expect. A well-run company, though, would be proud to show its team how they're valued by showing their work on the numbers. I think all four of these things are a good start. As always, send me your thoughts, questions, corrections to thebestideapodcast@gmail.com. Please comment, follow the show. If you like the content of any episode, share it with people, see where they stand, start a conversation. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at The Best Idea. Please visit the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/thebestidea. I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you next time.